Darci Lynne went to order a simple Taco Bell meal when she heard something that made her stop in her tracks, a young girl's muffled sobs that would lead to an unforgettable moment of connection and transformation. It was a quiet Wednesday evening when Darci Lynne pulled into the Taco Bell parking lot, her puppet case securely tucked in the passenger seat beside her. The familiar neon glow of the sign cast a warm light across the nearly empty lot, and through the windows she could see just a handful of customers inside. For Darci, this Taco Bell wasn't just another fast food stop. It was a reminder of simpler times, before America's Got Talent, before the tours, before her life became a whirlwind of performances and meet and greets. The exhaustion from her latest show weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had spent the past 6 hours performing for a packed audience, her voice shifting seamlessly between her own and those of her puppet friends, Petunia, Oscar, and Katie. Her throat felt dry, her fingers slightly sore from the constant manipulation of her puppet's controls. But more than physical tiredness, it was the emotional energy of constantly being on that made her crave these quiet moments of normalcy. The day had started early with sound checks and rehearsals, followed by interviews where she repeatedly answered questions about her journey from shy Oklahoma girl to ventriloquist sensation. She had performed her newest routine, where Petunia and Oscar debated the merits of classical versus pop music, bringing the house down with their dueling vocals. Between shows, she had met with young fans, each interaction reminding her of why she fell in love with ventriloquism in the first place. Its power to bring joy and break down barriers. Now pulling her baseball cap lower over her eyes and adjusting her simple hoodie, Darci tried to blend in with the casual evening crowd. At 17, she had mastered the art of being inconspicuous when needed, though it wasn't always easy. Her fingers instinctively reached for Petunia in her case, a habit born from years of the puppet being her source of confidence. But she stopped herself. Tonight, she just wanted to be regular teenage Darci, not the ventriloquist prodigy. As she reached for the door handle, Darci couldn't help but smile at how surreal her life had become. 5 years ago, she was just a shy girl who could barely speak in public, and now her face appeared on billboards and television screens across the country. The transformation still amazed her, though she remained grounded by her family's support and her Oklahoma roots. Fame had changed many things in her life, but moments like these, simple cravings for tacos on a quiet evening, reminded her that at her core she was still that same girl who found her voice through puppetry. Inside Taco Bell, the familiar scent of seasoned beef and warm tortillas filled the air. The fluorescent lights cast a soft glow over the tile floors, creating an almost dreamlike atmosphere that felt both familiar and somehow different tonight. The gentle hum of conversation mixed with the subtle sounds of kitchen staff preparing orders, creating that unique symphony of fast food ambiance that somehow felt comforting. For Darci, it was a welcome change from the thunderous applause and spotlight she'd grown accustomed to, a reminder of simpler moments before ventriloquism changed her life forever. A diverse group of people occupied the scattered tables, a young couple sharing nachos in one corner, a group of teenagers laughing over their shared jokes near the window, and an older man reading a newspaper while sipping his drink. A pause. Each person seemed wrapped in their own world, paying little attention to others around them. That's what Darci loved about places like this. Everyone was equal here, just looking for a simple meal and a moment of peace. No one was performing. No one was watching. They were all just being. From her spot in line, Darci found herself doing what she often did during shows, reading the room. It was a habit she developed early in her career, learning to gauge audience energy and adjust her performances accordingly. But tonight was different. Instead of searching for reactions or planning her next joke, she simply observed the genuine human moments unfolding around her. A mother wiping her child's face with a napkin, a tired worker finding solace in a warm meal, each scene telling its own story without need for spotlight or stage. The large windows reflected the dim evening light, creating a cozy barrier between the warmth inside and the growing darkness outside. Time seemed to move differently here, slower and more peaceful than the rushed pace of show business. The rhythmic sound of cars passing by outside added to the tranquil atmosphere, like a gentle reminder that the world kept turning even when you stepped away from the spotlight. For Darci, it was exactly the kind of ordinary moment she'd been craving, until something extraordinary caught her attention. That's when Darci heard it, a sound that cut through the casual chatter and restaurant noise. A soft, muffled sob coming from one of the corner booths. In her years of performing, she'd become attuned to different types of emotions in an audience, but this was different. This wasn't stage fright or performance anxiety. This was raw, genuine distress. The kind that made her heart squeeze with recognition, reminding her of her own struggles before finding her voice through ventriloquism. The source was a young girl, perhaps 11 or 12, hunched over in her seat, with her long brown hair creating a curtain around her face. Her shoulders trembled with each quiet sob, and her hands clutched what appeared to be a worn puppet. Not a professional one like Petunia, but a simple sock puppet, frayed at the edges from frequent handling. There was something hauntingly familiar about her posture, the way she seemed to want to disappear into herself. Beside her sat a woman who could only be her mother, her face etched with worry and exhaustion. She kept rubbing small circles on her daughter's back, whispering words of comfort that seemed to have little effect. The mother's other hand held a crumpled flyer, its bright colors a stark contrast to the heavy atmosphere surrounding their booth. Their half-eaten food sat forgotten, growing cold as the personal drama unfolded. "Sweetie, you don't have to do the talent show if you don't want to," the mother's words drifted over. "But you've worked so hard with Mr. Socksworth, and your ventriloquism has improved so much." The girl's response was barely audible, but Darci caught fragments about stage fright and fear of failure, about being laughed at, about not being good enough, words that echoed from her own past like a familiar song. In that moment, Darci felt something shift inside her. Her hand unconsciously moved to her puppet case, where Petunia rested safely inside. 5 years ago, she had been that girl, terrified of performing, of speaking up, of being seen. Now she had an opportunity to do something she wished someone had done for her back then. Without hesitation, she knew exactly what she needed to do. The moment Darci stepped closer to their booth, the mother's eyes widened with recognition. There was a brief pause in her comforting motions as she processed who was standing before them. "Oh my goodness," she whispered, her voice catching. You're Darci Lynne." The girl, still hidden behind her curtain of hair, didn't look up, but her sobs quieted slightly, perhaps sensing the shift in her mother's energy. The simple sock puppet in her hands trembled slightly, and Darci noticed how the girl's grip tightened around it, like a lifeline in a storm. Standing there, Darci felt herself transported back to her own childhood kitchen in Oklahoma, where she had spent countless hours practicing with her first puppet. The familiar ache of self-doubt flooded back. The trembling hands, the racing heart, the fear that threatened to silence her voice completely. She remembered how her own mother had sat with her through tears and frustrations, through failed attempts and shaky performances. Those memories weren't just past experiences, they were part of who she was, what had shaped her into the performer she'd become. The hours spent in front of mirrors, learning to form words without moving her lips, the embarrassment of early mistakes, the constant battle against her own shyness, it all came rushing back. She remembered the turning point, that magical moment when she realized that through her puppets she could be anyone, say anything, reach people in ways she never could before. It was more than just a skill. It was freedom, a key that had unlocked her voice and her future. The memories of her America's Got Talent audition surfaced next, standing on that enormous stage, heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. Petunia had been there, steady in her hands despite her nerves. The moment before the music started had felt eternal, filled with every doubt and fear she'd ever had. But then something magical had happened. The moment she opened her mouth to sing through Petunia, all those fears had melted away. Looking at this young girl now, clutching her homemade puppet like a shield against the world, Darci knew exactly what she needed to do. She reached for her puppet case, fingers finding the familiar clasp. This wasn't just about offering comfort or sharing a moment with a fan. This was about passing on the gift that had changed her own life. With Petunia in her hands, she felt that familiar surge of confidence that had carried her through countless performances. It was time to help another young voice find its way. "Hey there," Darci said softly, keeping her voice gentle as she approached the booth. "I couldn't help but notice your puppet friend." The young girl's head lifted slightly, just enough to peek through her hair at the visitor. Her eyes widened as recognition slowly dawned, darting between Darci's face and the professional puppet case she carried. The sock puppet in her hands, which Darci could now see had button eyes and yarn hair, trembled slightly as its young owner wrestled with surprise and nervousness. Something in that trembling reminded Darci so much of herself that she had to take a steadying breath. With practiced care, Darci opened her case and brought out Petunia, the rabbit puppet who had changed her life forever. The familiar weight in her hands brought an immediate sense of comfort, like greeting an old friend. "This is Petunia," she explained, adjusting the puppet's pink dress with the kind of attention that showed years of partnership. The girl's eyes followed every movement, transfixed by the professional puppet's appearance, while her own sock puppet remained clutched tightly in her lap. The connection was immediate. Two performers, two puppets, separated only by experience and time. "Would you like to know a secret?" Darci asked, settling Petunia comfortably on her arm. "Before Petunia, I was so shy I could barely speak to anyone. My first puppet wasn't nearly as fancy. It was a lot like your friend there." She nodded toward the sock puppet, which the girl now held a little less tightly. "Sometimes the simplest puppets tell the most amazing stories. They just need someone brave enough to help them speak." The girl's posture straightened slightly, interest beginning to override her earlier distress. Without warning, Petunia's head turned toward the girl, and in a voice completely different from Darci's, the rabbit exclaimed, "Oh my goodness, is that a fellow performer I see?" The girl gasped, her eyes widening as Darci's lips remained completely still during Petunia's speech. This was the magic moment Darci had seen hundreds of times before, that first realization that ventriloquism wasn't just a trick but a door to another world of expression. The mother leaned forward too, equally captivated by the seamless performance. Petunia continued her conversation, switching between singing a few notes of opera and telling a quick joke, all while Darci sipped from her drink to prove her lips weren't moving. The technical display was impressive, but it was the warmth and personality shining through that really captured their attention. Each word was carefully chosen to draw the girl further out of her shell, creating a safe space where performance became play rather than pressure. The sock puppet in the girl's hands began to move slightly, unconsciously mimicking Petunia's movements. Tears welled up in the mother's eyes as she watched her daughter's transformation. The change was subtle but profound. The way her shoulders had relaxed, how her face had emerged fully from behind her hair, the spark of possibility that now lit up her eyes. "She's been practicing for months," the mother whispered to Darci, her voice thick with emotion. "We've never seen her idol perform this close up. I never thought—" She trailed off, squeezing her daughter's shoulder gently as they both watched Petunia in amazement. "You know," Darci began, settling into the booth across from them, "when I was your age, I was terrified of speaking in front of others. My voice would shake, my hands would get clammy, and sometimes I'd even cry before performances." She watched as the girl's eyes widened with recognition. The sock puppet in the girl's hands lowered slightly, as if its owner was finally ready to listen rather than hide. Darci could see her words landing, breaking through that invisible wall of isolation that stage fright creates. "Then one day my mom gave me my first puppet. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple puppet, kind of like yours. But it changed everything. Suddenly it wasn't me speaking anymore, it was this whole other personality coming to life through my hands. The fear was still there, but now I had someone brave to help me face it. Every time I felt scared, my puppet would be there, ready to be strong when I couldn't be." With a gentle patience, Darci demonstrated the fundamental technique that had become second nature to her. "The secret," she explained, positioning Petunia, "isn't about not moving your lips, it's about finding your voice in a different way. See how my tongue stays behind my teeth?" She pronounced each consonant clearly, showing how the sounds formed. The girl leaned forward, her own puppet now held at attention, absorbing every detail with intense concentration. "Let's try something simple. Darci suggested, reaching for a clean napkin from the dispenser. This is how I started, just practicing with a napkin on my lips. If the napkin moves, you know you're moving your lips too much. It's like a little game, seeing how still you can keep it. She demonstrated, making the B and M sounds that had once challenged her so much, the napkin barely fluttering as she spoke. The girl hesitantly took her own napkin, placing it against her lips just as Darci had shown. Her first attempt at speaking without moving her lips produced only muffled sounds, but Darci noticed something crucial: the spark of determination in her eyes. Each try brought more clarity, more confidence, as if each word was a small victory against her fears. The sock puppet began to move more naturally in her hands, becoming an extension of her emerging voice. Within minutes, the girl managed to say hello while keeping the napkin still, her eyes lighting up with achievement. Her puppet, now held higher and prouder, seemed to share in her triumph. The mother watched in amazement as her daughter, who had been in tears just moments ago, began to experiment with different sounds and voices, each attempt bolder than the last. Other customers had begun to notice the impromptu lesson, forming a small, appreciative audience at nearby tables. Their presence, rather than adding pressure, created a supportive atmosphere of shared wonder. Some took out their phones to record the moment, but most simply watched with warm smiles as a young girl discovered her voice through the magic of ventriloquism. The Taco Bell staff paused in their duties, caught up in the transformation happening in their corner booth. Then it happened, a moment of pure magic that changed everything. The girl lifted her sock puppet, now named Mr. Socksworth, and without a single lip movement made him say, "Hello, Miss Petunia." The words came out clear and strong, carrying none of the fear that had gripped her earlier. The entire Taco Bell seemed to hold its breath, witnessing the exact moment when a young performer found her voice. Building on her newfound confidence, she made Mr. Socksworth tell a simple joke about tacos, her technique growing stronger with each word. Her eyes sparkled with the same light Darci remembered seeing in her own reflection years ago. That magical moment when you realize you're capable of something extraordinary. The puppet's movements became more natural, more alive, as if drawing strength from its owner's growing confidence. The small crowd that had gathered around their booth burst into genuine applause. Even the kitchen staff paused their work to join in the celebration. The girl's cheeks flushed pink with pride rather than embarrassment, and Mr. Socksworth took a theatrical bow, making everyone laugh. It wasn't just applause for a performance, it was recognition of a breakthrough. Through tears of joy, the mother watched her daughter transform before her eyes. Gone was the terrified girl who had been sobbing just minutes ago. In her place sat a young performer, sitting straighter, smiling brighter, holding her puppet with newfound purpose. She reached across the table and squeezed Darci's hand, unable to find words for her gratitude. For Darci, this moment transcended any stage performance she'd ever given. In this unlikely setting of a Taco Bell, she had witnessed the same transformation that had changed her own life years ago. Sometimes the biggest victories happen in the smallest places, she thought, watching the girl practice with renewed determination. As Darci watched the girl practice, memories of her own America's Got Talent journey flooded back. The bright lights, the thunderous applause, Simon Cowell's surprised expression, it all seemed distant compared to this intimate moment. That stage had changed her life, but this Taco Bell booth was where the real magic of ventriloquism shined through, in helping another young voice find its way. The mechanics of ventriloquism were complex, from substituting difficult consonants to mastering the subtle art of misdirection. But watching this young girl grasp these concepts so quickly reminded Darci that talent often just needs a gentle nudge to bloom. Her own years of practice, countless hours of perfecting each sound and movement, had led to this moment of passing. The torch 5 years had transformed Darci from a shy Oklahoma girl into a renowned performer. But moments like these grounded her. Sometimes the greatest achievements weren't the standing ovations or television appearances, but the quiet victories of helping someone else overcome their fears. This was why she'd been given this gift, not just to perform, but to inspire. As the evening wound down, Darci reached into her puppet case and pulled out a small notebook. She wrote down her email address along with some of her favorite ventriloquism exercises and tips for conquering stage fright. The girl clutched the paper like a precious treasure, while Mr. Socksworth, now more confident than ever, whispered a thank you that brought smiles to everyone's faces. "I want you to perform at your talent show," Darci said, looking directly at the girl. "And I want you to send me a video of it. Remember, Mr. Socksworth isn't just a puppet. He's your partner on stage, your voice when you're scared, and your courage when you need it most." The girl nodded, determination replacing the fear that had brought her to tears earlier. They shared one final moment, four performers in their own right. Darci, Petunia, the young girl, and Mr. Socksworth. As they hugged goodbye, the mother whispered, "You've given her so much more than ventriloquism lessons tonight." Darci smiled, knowing that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the simplest moments, even in a Taco Bell on an ordinary evening. 3 weeks later, Darci received a video that brought tears to her eyes. There was the girl, standing confidently on her school's talent show stage, Mr. Socksworth perched proudly on her arm. Together, they performed a flawless rendition of "You've Got a Friend in Me," their voices harmonizing perfectly without a single lip movement. The standing ovation they received wasn't just for the technical skill, it was for the transformation of a shy girl who found her voice through the magic of ventriloquism. Have you ever experienced a moment where a chance encounter changed someone's life? Where a simple act of kindness or shared passion created something magical? We'd love to hear your stories of unexpected connections and transformative moments. Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more heartwarming stories of real people making real differences in the most unexpected places.